Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Xuemei You from Editorial Office of Theoretical and Applied Mechanics Letters, TIMO. It's my honor to start this webinar. Before we delve into today's stimulating discussions, please allow me a moment to introduce both our journal and today's webinar. The journal we represent is named Theoretical and Applied Mechanics Letters, commonly abbreviated as TAML, TIMO. TIMO aims at publishing novel, cutting-edge researchers in theoretical, computational, and experimental mechanics. The journal provides fast publication of letter-sized articles and invited reviewers, on average within 5 weeks. We emphasize highlighting advances in science, engineering, and technology with originality and rapidity. The journal publishes 3 main types of articles: letters, research articles, review articles, and etc. In January 2021, TIMO became a gold open access journal, but it continues with the same aims and scope, editorial team, and a rigorous peer review. As an open access journal with no subscription charges, the article publishing charge, APC, is payable by the author or research funder upon acceptance to cover the costs associated with publication. Below, we highlight 3 key points. Impact factor growth. We are proud to announce that our journal's impact factor has seen a significant rise, standing at 3.4 for the year 2022, with our latest science score tracker reaching 6.1. This growth is a testament to the quality and relevance of the research we publish. Rapid publication. Our commitment to swift dissemination of research is stronger than ever. Currently, the average time to the first decision is just 3 weeks, ensuring that your groundbreaking work reaches the academic community promptly. Dedicated team. At TIMO, we pride ourselves on having a highly dedicated and professional team, consisting of 75 editors and board members from 7 different countries. The editors-in-chief are Guo Weihe and Professor Yonggang Huang. Each member is affiliated with globally recognized universities and research institutions, bringing a wealth of diversity and expertise to our journal. This exceptional team is committed to upholding the highest standards of academic excellence and integrity. We are dedicated to offering unparalleled support to our reviewers and authors and the broader community. Rest assured, our team's extensive expertise is at your disposal, ready to guide you through the publication process. We warmly invite you to consider submitting your research to TIMO and join us, our growing community of contributors. Let's move on to the next slide to introduce the specifics of today's webinar. Thanks. This webinar is jointly hosted by TIMO Elsevier, the Chinese Society of Theoretical and Applied Mechanics, at the National Nature Science Foundation of China Basic Science Center program, focusing on multi-scale problems in nonlinear mechanics. Our goal is to offer an international platform for researchers to communicate and share their latest work, fostering collaboration and advancing knowledge in our field. You can follow the webinar through our webpage on Elsevier and CSTM. Join our WeChat group via the provide barcode, or follow us through our other communication channels for continuous updates. Finally, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to everyone involved in making this webinar possible. Special thanks go to today's speaker, Professor Yihui Zhang, and today's webinar host, Professor Jianliang Xiao. Your contributions are invaluable to the success of this event. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to an engaging and informative webinar. Now, I would like to pass the baton to our webinar host, Professor Jianliang Xiao, who will take us through the next section of our webinar. Professor Xiao, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Yu. Hello, everyone. This is Jianliang Xiao. I'm from the University of Colorado Boulder. I'm very delighted to be invited as the host for this webinar featuring Professor Yihui Zhang. To start the webinar, let me give a brief introduction of the speaker. Professor Yihui Zhang is a professor of engineering mechanics at Tsinghua University. His group is dedicated to addressing the grand challenges in the frontiers of science and technologies through creative uses of mechanics principles and cross-fertilization among diverse disciplines, which drives development of new mechanics theories and computational models of advanced materials structures, as well as novel designs and fabrication approaches of materials, devices, systems with unprecedented properties and functionalities. His current research interests include mechanically guided 3D assembly, soft architected materials, and mechanics of flexible structures. He has published more than 170 peer-reviewed journal papers, including many in Science, Nature, Science Sister Journals, Nature Sister Journals, PNAS, JMPS, Advanced Materials. He's also inventor of 9 China patents and 3 US patents. Professor Yihui Zhang is a recipient of many honors and awards, including SME Gustus Nassen Memorial Award, SFC National Science Foundation for Distinguished Young Scholars, Clarivate Highly Cited Researcher, the Explore Prize, SME Thomas J. Hughes Young Investigator Award, Society of Engineering Science Young Investigator Award, SME Sia Nemat Lesser Early Career Award, Ashby Mechanics Award for Young Faculty, SME Melville Medal, General Applied Mechanics Award, 求是 Outstanding Young Scholar Award, and the MIT Technology Reviews 35 Innovators Under 35, the global version. So it's a long list of awards. I want to emphasize that Professor Wang Yihui Zhang is one of very few awardees that received all the major Young Investigator Award in mechanics area. He is an editor of Mechanics for Materials and the associate editor of Science Advances Research and International Journal of Smart and Nanomaterials, and also past associate editor of JAM. And also he serves on the editorial board of several other academic journals. So let's welcome Professor Yihui Zhang. I will pass the stadium to Professor Zhang and really look forward to his exciting talk.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you very much, Professor Xiao, for the very nice introduction. Hello, every online audience. Firstly, I would like to take this chance to thank Professor Guowei He for launching this wonderful theoretical and applied mechanics letters webinar series, and for offering this opportunity for me to introduce the research group. So the topic I'm going to talk about is the mechanic-guided 3D assembly approach. And in this work, we focus on the use of mechanics principles to develop a new 3D fabrication approach for electronics and microsystems. And my talk includes 5 parts. Starting with the introduction to the research background and the motivation, I will give a brief introduction to the mechanics-guided 3D assembly approach and discuss the challenges faced in the accurate shape programming of this method. And then I will talk about the microlattice design we introduced recently to enable the inverse design of 3D surfaces. And finally, I will talk about some unique applications enabled by this approach. Nowadays, electronic devices have already spread into almost every corner of our daily life. Actually, for quite a long time, since the 1960s, the development of integrated electronics follows the prediction of Moore's law very well. However, during the last 10 years, we can observe an evident lag between the development of integrated electronics and the prediction of Moore's law. So we can see a clear gap here between the colored line and the green line. This is mainly because the microfabrication techniques have already approached their physical limits. So how to extend the Moore's law? We need to introduce new ideas. Since the third dimension can bring brand new opportunities, the 3D microelectronic devices have already become an important research direction in the era of post-Moore's law. When comparing to 2D designs, the 3D electronic devices can provide broader design spaces, better mechanical and electrical performances, and even brand new functions. For example, Professor Daeyoung Kim from Seoul National University and Professor Yang-Min Song from JISC have made inspiring progress in bio-inspired electronic eyes. And in this specific work, inspired by the unique structure and functional features of cuttlefish eye, they have devised an artificial vision system that can enable high contrast and high acuity imaging even under uneven illumination conditions. So this is attributed to the unique structural features. Because of these outstanding advantages of 3D designs, the 3D electronics have very important applications in bio-integrated electronics, microrobots, tissue engineering, and healthcare, with the potential to upgrade their device form. Then let's look at the geometrical and physical features of 3D electronic devices. So these electronics usually have very small feature sizes, sometimes down to micron scale and even sub-micron scale. And these electronic devices typically have complex 3D shapes, involving, for example, multi-layer ribbons, curvy surfaces, and even hierarchical constructions. And under external loadings, for example, if you compress it, or you stretch it, or you rub it, these devices show strong nonlinear mechanical responses. And additionally, these electronics usually contain multiple different functional components, including, for example, sensing components, actuation, wireless communication, and data acquisition modules. And because of these features, it's extremely challenging to achieve customized design and fabrication of 3D electronic devices. In particular, the microfabrication techniques well established in semiconductor industries work very well for 2D inorganic devices and do not work directly for 3D fabrication. For example, this table summarizes some representative fabrication approaches for 3D electronic devices, including, for example, stacked 3D integration, residual stress-induced 3D assembly, pinning-induced 3D assembly, capillary force-induced assembly, and FIB-induced assembly. Each of these methods has its own advantages and disadvantages, as summarized here. For example, the stacked 3D integration scheme can enable 3D devices with highly integrated density and also high machining accuracy. But because of the complex fabrication process, it's very challenging to achieve highly complex 3D geometries like a sphere or 3D networks. The pinning-induced 3D assembly is a very creative method developed by Professor Huajian Gao, who is now working at Tsinghua University, and also Professor Xiaodong Chen from Nanyang Technological University. And this method utilizes plastic deformations induced during the pinning to enable the transformation of 2D structures into sophisticated 3D architectures. And this method works very well for metals and polymers, but remains challenging for semiconductors like single crystal silicon. So if we use a reader graph to do a comparison of these approaches in terms of material type, geometric complexity, fabrication speed, fabrication precision, and level of functional integration, you will see a large blank area in this region. Therefore, a grand challenge in the field is to develop an approach that can enable fabrication of complex 3D electronic devices in inorganic semiconductors and other high-performance materials. So to address this challenge, we started relevant studies from 2012, and now we have established an approach distinct from all of the previous ones. The key idea is to go one step further beyond the traditional 2D fabrication by using compressive buckling to deform easily patterned 2D structures into well-controlled 3D architectures. After devising this approach, an important aspect involves exploration of a class of 3D geometries accessible to this approach. Another fundamental question is how to develop quantitative mechanics models that can serve as a basis of inverse design. This is also to answer the question of how to map the target 3D configuration onto initial 2D pattern. And in addition to developing the approach itself, we are also interested in exploring some unique applications enabled by this singular approach. Okay, I will use a very simple example to illustrate the process of this approach. The very first work in this area was done in collaboration with Professor Yonggong Huang and Professor John Rogers from Northwestern University. So here, we first need to use a soft material as the assembly platform. And we apply a uniaxial pre-stretch to this soft material. And this platform will provide forces required for the compressive buckling. And in the meanwhile, we can use a microfabrication technique to create pattern 2D thin film. And in this example, the film is made of single crystal silicon and shows a serpentine configuration. And then we integrate the pattern 2D thin film with the pre-stretched elastomer substrate. And here, by using techniques of surface chemistry, we can create strong covalent bonding selectively only at the red sites. The other places in blue are simply weak in the face and can pop up easily from the substrate surface after release of the pre-strain. So in this example, the 2D serpentine deforms into 3D conical coil after release of the pre-strain. And this idea has been validated by our experiments. So if you look at the SEM image here, this is actually the experimental results done in 2013. And this material is made of single crystal silicon, the most important material in the information industries. And here I would like to emphasize that the single crystal silicon is a very brittle material and can undergo just 2% strain before its fracture. So this means that if you stretch a sample from length 1 to length 1.02, it will break. So here the mechanics play a very important role in the design because we need to ensure the safety of the structure under such large level of compression and deformation. In short, our idea is to go one step beyond the traditional 2D fabrication techniques, and we introduce structure design concepts to enable control 2D to 3D transformation. Because the plano fabrication can enable mass production and thousands of components can be fabricated at one batch. Our 3D assembly approach is fully compatible with 2D fabrication, and therefore our approach can also assemble thousands of 3D mesostructures and even devices at one time. One powerful aspect of this approach is the broad applicable range of material types. In addition to single crystal silicon, this approach also applies well to other semiconductors and also for metals, polymers, plastics, ceramics, and even piezoelectric materials like PVDF and PZT. And additionally, the flexible printed circuit board and also integrated circuits can be also assembled into well-controlled 3D configurations, as shown here. Another powerful aspect is the applicable range of length scales. Unlike many of the other approaches, this approach applies perfectly well to a broad range of length scales, from submicron scale to even meter scale. So here to provide some intuitional impressions, we compare our assembled structures with some objects in real life. For example, the submicron scale 3D structure has a comparable dimension to blood cells. In addition to the microscale 3D structure, sees a human hair. So you can see a single human hair across this 3D structure. And the rightmost panel shows the largest structure we have achieved, which is comparable to a human body. So after my group and our collaborators published a few papers in this area, our works were quickly noticed by the editors of Nature Reviews Materials and Advanced Materials, and they invited us to write review papers on these topics. So these works were both published as cover articles in these journals. You may find this image to be quite interesting. Actually, in this example, we use a very simple kirigami design to achieve a tiger as a microscale. You can imagine that this tiger is completely flat at the initial state, and we simply use the compressive buckling to trigger its pop-up into this tiger. In order to expand the range of 3D geometry is accessible to this approach, we have devised a set of design concepts and strategies. According to the above introduction, you may notice that there are just 3 core elements in this 3D assembly approach, including the 2D precursor, deformable substrate, and how you integrate them together. So for each core element, we have introduced a series of design concepts to strengthen the capabilities of the 3D assembly. So today, due to the time limit, I will just choose 3 examples to illustrate. And you may take a look at these publications if you are interested in the other part. So right after we published the first paper in Science to report the assembly of 3D ribbon structures, an intuitive idea is to extend this approach to 3D surfaces or 3D membranes. But a simple extension might cause unexpected issues, as illustrated on the left of this slide. For example, if you assign 4 bonding pads uniformly at the boundary of a circle or a square, there will be evident localized deformations in the central area of the structure during the compression process. And this will lead strong strain concentration. As you can see here, the peak value of the strain already reached around 5%. So in this case, if you use single crystal silicon to fabricate, it will break. So to resolve this issue, we introduced kirigami designs to change the load transfer paths within the structure. And after introducing kirigami cards, the localized deformations disappear, and the strain concentration is evidently relieved. So this is evidenced by the value of peak strain. In these 2 examples, the strain reduces from around 5% to 1.3 and 1.5% respectively. And in this case, if you use single crystal silicon to fabricate, they will survive. Then let's look at an example of 3D silicon kirigami. And in this example, we introduce a set of fractal crossing cards that divide a large square into 16 small squares, which are interconnected with each other. So this video shows a dynamic formation process of this 3D membrane structure. And this one shows the experimental results in single crystal silicon with a thickness of 300 nanometers. As you can see here, the lateral size of the entire structure is around 200 micron. So this is very difficult to achieve using previous approaches. Actually, there are many biological systems which show complex curved shapes, such as many plants and animal organs. So we sometimes want our 3D structures to be assembled on the top of curved substrate. And for this purpose, we have developed a kind of order assembly strategy that involves the use of predefined mechanical loadings to deform the curved substrate into flat or cylindrical configuration, followed by an additional level of pre-strain to trigger the buckling guided assembly. And in this context, we have considered 3 types of curved substrates, including the curved substrate that can be flattened by stretching, cylinder substrate, although very close to cylinders, as well as curved substrate that can be deformed into approximate flat configurations by complex loadings, like twisting or combined twisting and bending. So this slide shows the 2-step assembly process of the order assembly by using a human face substrate as an example. In this case, we firstly use a biaxial pre-stretch to flatten the substrate, and then apply an additional level of biaxial pre-stretch. And then we do the transfer printing. And during the release of the pre-strain, the first order assembly corresponds to the process of buckling guided assembly on a flat substrate. And the second order assembly corresponds to the pop-up of the substrate into the initial curved shape. And this video shows a similar process of the 2-step assembly process for a metal ribbon structure on the top of the hemispherical structure. So the first order assembly corresponds to the assembly of the metal ribbon structure on a flat substrate. And the second order assembly corresponds to the pop-up of the substrate into the initial hemispherical shape. In the last example, we introduced optical cropping to a cylindric substrate such that the substrate can be flattened by bending deformations. And by doing so, we can assemble a hierarchical helical 3D structure inside the tube, which is extremely to achieve by using other approaches. Actually, in previous studies, we always release the biaxial pre-strain in the substrate simultaneously. The result is a deterministic 3D assembly, with the smooth changes of 3D shapes. Here I will show that for some specially engineered precursor designs, we can play with the sequence of the release in the pre-strain to achieve multiple stable modes of buckling. So here is an example to illustrate this idea. At the center shows a crossing precursor design, which is attached to a biaxially pre-strained substrate. And here the green color denotes the creases with reduced thickness, and the red color denotes the bonding size. Here, if you release the biaxial pre-strain simultaneously along two directions, the structure will follow this deformation path, and finally you will get this shape 1 mode. But if you instead use the sequential release by releasing the x directional strain first and the y direction second, the x directional ribbon will form 2 waves first because of the constraint from the y directional ribbon. And after that, if you further release the remnant pre-strain along y direction, the entire structure will be trapped into this 2-wave mode, and finally you will get this shape 2 configuration. This means that if you stretch and release with different sequences, the structure will be reshaped between the shape 1 and shape 2 modes. And this idea has been validated by our experiments at microscale. And this kind of loading path control strategy can be used to achieve more complex reconfiguration process. And this one shows an example that corresponds to a structure that can be reshaped between an octopus and a spider. And this one shows the experimental results in metal with a literal size of several millimeters. And this one shows the finite element simulation results. And this one shows the loading paths. So here, we can play the video again. If you release the biaxial pre-strain simultaneously from two directions, the 2D structure will be assembled into this octopus 3D structure. And if you stretch the substrate again, the structure will go flat. And then if you do sequential release by releasing y directional strain first and x second, the structure will be reshaped into a spider. And actually, this reconfiguration process can be done thousands of times, meaning that this octopus can be to this spider thousands of times, even if it's made of metal, because we can use mechanics design to control the value of the maximum strain in the 3D structure during the process. Well, according to the above introduction, you may notice that this kind of 3D assembly approach actually corresponds to a process of post-buckling deformations in thin film structures. So it's important to have a mechanics model that can serve as the basis of the theoretical design. And for this purpose, we need to first solve the forward problem of predicting nonlinear buckling deformations for prescribed 2D precursor structures. So here we need to analyze the deformation features first. And here, by using a helical 3D structure as an example, we can analyze the dominant deformations during the post-buckling process. And according to the analysis of the various deformation modes, we can determine that the post-buckling deformation is dominated by the autoplane bending and the twisting deformation. And accordingly, we can propose a new concept called mode ratio to characterize the deformation feature, which is defined as the average twisting curvature divided by the average bending curvature. And when the mode ratio is very large, this means the structure is dominated by both bending and twisting deformations. And when this mode ratio is very small, this means that it's dominated by bending deformation. And if you want to further predict the 3D configuration resulted from the 3D assembly, we need to have a predictive post-buckling model. And for this purpose, we have developed a double perturbation method for the post-buckling analysis. In particular, we introduced two perturbation parameters to linearize the nonlinear governing equation. And by doing so, we can obtain analytical solutions of post-buckling deformations and also curvatures for general curved beams. And one of the parameters is related to the magnitude of the outer plane deformation, and the other is related to the magnitude of the initial flexing level of the 2D precursor. So if you look at the results on the bottom, you will see that the analytical solutions agree very well with our experimental results and also FEA results. The shape programming of the 3D assembly actually requires the development of an inverse design method to serve as a basis. But the inverse design is more challenging. We have worked on this problem for around 6 years, and one of the solutions we propose is to utilize the spatial cyclist variation to tune the curvature distribution during the assembly. And here, in terms of the cyclist variation strategy, we have derived this correlation of the cyclist distribution in terms of the curvature distribution for a straight beam in the simply supported condition. So according to this analytical solution, we can assemble arc-shaped or other asymmetric curved ribbons. And this model can be extended to centrally symmetric 3D surfaces. And this slide shows two examples, including a hemisphere and a drum. But for the cyclist variation, the fabrication is extremely challenging because it's very challenging to achieve precise tailoring of the cyclist variation for 2D films, especially for electronic materials. And actually, according to our previous studies, by using the grid-scale photolithography, the cyclist resolution we can achieve is just 1 micron. And by using this kind of technique, the smallest structure we can achieve is a hemisphere with a diameter of 4 millimeters. But at this scale, you can also see a large distortion of the assembled structure from our design target. So here the challenges include the high nonlinearity, the bending twisting coupling, and the high machining accuracy. So it remains very challenging to program highly complex 3D surfaces at the micro scale. To address this challenge, we turn to nature to find answers. We know that many cellular microstructures form naturally in plants and leaves to provide vital functions in their ship formation, in the transport of nutrients, and also during their evolution. For example, the non-uniformly distributed cellular structure form a closed cage in the Philadelphia and also in the Tsinghua vagarius flower to form closed cage to protect their fruits inside the cage. And inspired by those biological 3D surfaces, we propose the use of porosity distribution in microlattice design to achieve desired stiffness control, and thereby allowing their transformation into programmable 3D surfaces. And by using this kind of microlattice design, we can bypass the technical challenges in the gradient thickness control. Because based on the microfabrication techniques, we can easily control the width distribution in the 2D structure. And the smallest width we can achieve is around several tens of nanometers for the width. And then we first show the capabilities of this microlattice design by using two flower surfaces as our design targets, including this stramonium and the jasminoid flower. And both of these surfaces have a certain degree of chirality. And here, by using our microlattice design, we can leverage the discreteness mediated deformation and introduce locally controlled porosity distribution to reproduce this chirality in biological surfaces. And here, by modifying the local porosity distribution, we can even change the local porosity. We can even change the chirality of the assembled 3D surface. Then we look at the regional inverse design of the shape programming. And in terms of the straight ribbon structure, the inverse design problem is actually to find an optimal porosity distribution of the 2D precursor that can yield the assembled 3D ribbon, which agrees very well with our design target. So in the condition of simply supported beam, we can derive this kind of analytical solution of the porosity distribution in terms of the curvature distribution and the width distribution. And if you look at the results here, you will see that the analytical solution agree very well with our experimental results for arc-shaped ribbon structures. So this model of the ribbon structure can be extended to the inverse design of curvy surfaces with centrally symmetry. So here, for a specific example of the octopus surface, the flow of inverse design is like this. We first use the idea of discretization to form this kind of design target with a set of developable ribbon components. And then, according to this solution, we can derive this kind of stiffness distribution and porosity distribution. With this information, we can construct the 2D precursor with micro-lattice design using fully triangular lattice patterns. And then we can testify the design by using numerical experiments and real experiments. So according to the comparison here, the profile of the octopus pad shows very good agreements between our experiments and our design target. So based on this inverse design method, we have achieved the inverse design of more than 10 axisymmetric meso surfaces, with a few examples shown on this slide, including, for example, the hemisphere, this kind of volcano-like surface, and this palace-like surface, as well as an entire sphere, the vase-like surface. And here, these 4 videos shows a dynamic formation process of the micro-lattice 2D structure into the 3D surface. And this one corresponds to our experiments. This one are numerical simulations. And here I would like to emphasize that these surfaces have a curvature radius of around just 1 millimeter. And at this scale, we can achieve accurate shape programming for this different kind of 3D. And this is very challenging to achieve, especially by using single crystal silicon. And because this method is fully compatible with the 2D fabrication approaches, so this method can be used to assemble 3D surfaces in a variety of materials like graphene, the laser-induced graphene, the polymers, the monocrystalline silicon, and also polycrystalline silicon, as well as other materials. And the length scale also range from a few hundreds of microns to centimeter scale. So if the target surface cannot be discretized into a group of developable ribbons, the beam theory I just showed will not work. And in this context, introducing a machine learning algorithm allows us to develop a more general inverse design method for 3D surfaces with general symmetries or without any symmetries. And in particular, we exploited a point cloud-based neural network to predict the 2D point coordinates and the porosity distribution for a prescribed set of 3D coordinates. So in this example, you can see that this method works very well for seashell surface. And in this example, we divide the entire surface into 11 undevelopable ribbon components. And here are two more examples of 3D shape programming based on the machine learning algorithm, including a pimento-like mesosurface and an ant-like mesosurface. And here, by discretizing the ant-like mesosurface with a cutting strategy inspired by CT, we can generate the 2D microlattice design from the machine learning model. As you can see here, we can use around 4,000 micro triangles and around 8,000 micro ribbons to reproduce this ant surface at a millimeter scale. So this octopus surface and this ant-like surface were luckily selected by the editors of Nature and Science to highlight in their journals. Due to the powerful capabilities of the 3D assembly method, it can be used to develop different types of new electronic devices and systems, such as 4D antennas, whose radiation pattern can be tuned on demand, and the 3D bio-integrated electronics that can be mounted on a variety of organs, and also the 3D microrobots with different locomotion modes. And here, due to a time limit, I will choose a few examples to illustrate in this talk. So firstly, this kind of microlattice design allows us to construct 3D electronic systems with desired 3D shapes. And here is a retina-inspired 3D electronic cell scaffold. In this example, we can develop a spherical cap-shaped electronic cell scaffold with integrated sensing capabilities. And actually, there are many publications on cell scaffolds based on 3D printing. But these previous studies cannot integrate electronic components on the 3D printed cell scaffolds. So here in our work, the developed electronic cell scaffold can not only provide a support to grow the RPE cells, but also enable the quantitative monitoring of the growth and apoptosis of the RPE cells during the growth through the impedance measurements, as shown here. Here is another example in terms of a breathable hemispherical electronic cardiac device. And according to the geometric feature of the cardiac apex, we can design a 3D cardiac device with similar 3D geometry and a similar dimension to match the design target. As you can see here, this 3D cardiac device can adaptively wrap onto the curved surface to offer high signal-to-noise sensing of the temperature. It can also achieve localized thermal ablation by using the microheater. And because this device is very flexible, it does not induce large mechanical constraints during the heart contraction and expansion. And to increase the reliability of the 3D electronic device, we have developed an anti-fatigue design strategy. And here, the key is to convert the metal-dominated fatigue failure into the polymer-dominated failure. And our fatigue experiments showed that even by adding a very thin polymer layer, the fatigue life can be significantly increased, for example, to above 100,000 cycles. And based on this strategy, we have developed an anti-fatigue temperature device capable of generous decoupled temperature sensing based on the low thermal conductivity of the air. As you can see here, one of the sensors is on the back of the substrate, and the other is on the top of the 3D structure. So by using this kind of device, it can monitor the temperature of the contacting object and the temperature of the sensor itself. And this device can be compressed repetitively to around 62% by over 100,000 times without failure. And based on this method, biomimetic 3D structures that imitate the dynamic characteristics of living organisms is also possible based on the microlattice design. And this slide shows a stingray inspired by motor actuator. Actually, when the stingray swims in the water, it has two typical swimming modes. One of them is to have two fins flapping in the same phase, and another is to have the flap the two fins in different phase. And inspired by these different modes, we can design two circuits inside integrated with the fins, which can generate periodically varying Lorentz forces to trigger the vibration. And as you can see here in the video, two different vibration modes can be excited by varying the current direction and varying the frequency. So actually, one of the vibration mode has a vibration frequency of 5 Hertz, and the other has a frequency of 100 Hertz. This is quite different. And here shows a soft climbing microrobot. And this work was inspired by the pioneering work of climbing robot done by Professor Guoying Gu from Shanghai Jiao Tong University. So in this example, we use the 3D assembly approach to design a set of LCE-based 3D microactuators with large actuation deformations. And based on these microactuators, we can fabricate a class of 3D microrobots, which is much smaller than a coin. And due to the conformal footpaths, the microrobots can climb on various different curved surfaces with both constant curvatures and also varying curvatures. And inspired by the locomotion gates of Hydra, the microrobot can also achieve both locomotion of stepping and flipping gates. As you can see here, the microrobots can achieve transition between different walls with both the stepping and the flipping gates. And as a result, the microrobot integrated with camera can climb and detect the environment in a narrow space. And here is a short summary of this talk. So from this talk, we have developed a mechanics-guided 3D assembly methods for microelectronics with different materials and a variety of structural topology. And we have also introduced Bao-inspired microlattice design to achieve accurate shape programming. And this method can enable unique applications in a diversity of areas. And actually, there are also many opportunities in this very young field. And because of the gaps in the size, structure, materials, and mechanisms, there exist lots of opportunities to match the 3D assembly techniques with the biological counterparts to achieve enhanced biological geometry, complexity, and biological intelligence. So here list a few areas with many opportunities, such as by developing new approaches to achieve extreme sizes or a wide range of size spanning. And also we can explore extreme deformations or reconfigurations based on new 3D assembly method. And there are many other examples I will not repeat here. And last, I would like to acknowledge my collaborators. In particular, I would like to thank my senior collaborators, including Professor Gong Huang and Professor John Rogers from Northwestern University. I also would like to thank Professor Zheng Yan from University of Missouri and Professor Li Wen from Beijing University. And also, these works were done in by the group of my group, including my postdocs and PhD students. It is them who did all of those works. And also, I would like to thank the sponsors. And with that, I would like to close and thank for your attention. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you, Professor Yihui Zhang, for the very intriguing talk. And now it's time to ask questions. So any questions from the audience? So I think the audience can use the chat function to type your questions. While we are waiting for input from the audience, I will just start with some questions. So first of all, Professor Zhang, so you showed very interesting picture. You transferred devices onto the flattened human face substrate. And because the complexity of the human face, I can imagine it must be very difficult to make it like completely flattened. So is there any challenges when you try to transfer print the device onto the substrate?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Very good question. So your question is regarding if there are any challenges to transfer print 2D structures onto the pre-stretched human face substrate, right?
Yes.
So actually, this depends on how small your 2D precursor compared to the feature size of the human face substrate. And in our example, when the feature size of the human face substrate is not so small, then it's okay to pre-stretch it to an approximate flat configuration. And in this case, the success rate of transfer printing is quite high. But if the feature size of the transfer printed 2D structure is very small as compared to the feature size of the human face substrate, then there will be some failure because of the small curved shapes in the pre-stretched substrate. So this depends on the comparison of the feature size of the transfer printed structure and the curved substrate.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the audience? Yeah, I have another question. So on slide number 28, so you use the lattice design to change the distribution of mechanical properties to achieve a lot of interesting three-dimensional structures. And before that, you also mentioned you did like a controlling of thickness variation through different regions of the material to achieve different structures. So was there any like also thickness variation in this lattice design?
Okay, this is also a very good question. Actually, the purpose of this micro lattice design is to bypass the technical challenges in the gradient thickness control. Actually, for electronic materials, it's quite challenging to fabricate 2D films with gradient thickness variation. So by introducing this kind of microlattice design, we use the non-uniform width distribution in the microlattice pattern to achieve the desired stiffness control. So in the examples shown here, we just change the porosity distribution in the microlattice, and there is no thickness variation in the thin film.
Okay, sounds good. So that means you actually have more freedom, more degrees freedom that you can add to your design, next design to even maybe achieve more possibilities, right?
Right, correct, correct. This is the key advantage of the microlattice design.
Okay, okay, great. Yeah, so any questions from the audience? Yeah, so if no questions from the audience, I guess I will just pass the stage to, well, that's someone, I think, yeah, so if no questions from audience, I'll just pass the stage to Miss Yu. She's going to make some announcements regarding the journal and the publisher.
Okay. As we conclude today's webinar, I would like to thank our esteemed speaker, Professor Yihui Zhang, and today's webinar host, Professor Jianliang Xiao, again, for their invaluable insights. I was thoroughly impressed by the quality and depth of your presentation. It's very good. And you, our audience, for your active participation. For each attending, LC will provide a workshop code. Click the link below to download your personalized certificate of attendance. Please follow the 4 steps outlined below. Additionally, LC will offer attending a 20% discount code for book purchases. Could you please move on the next slide? Thanks. Yeah. We have covered several key points today, which we hope you found enlightening. We look forward to getting your feedback. Your opinions are crucial for improving our future sections. Stay tuned for announcements on our next events and don't hesitate to reach out through our contact page with any questions or for more information. Thank you once again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next month's seminar. Goodbye and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.